So good day everyone, I am Lizbeth Lacson together with Mr. Rhonfhel Pilapil. Today, we are going to present our analysis of Breathe Eyes Memory by Edwidge Danticat. So, Breathe Eyes Memory by Edwidge Danticat is a novel narrated through the voice of Sophie Kako, the principal protagonist of the story. Sophie's life revealed her experiences as Haitian woman and of Haitian women, as shown by all the characters that took part in her life. The story of the characters in this novel reflects the pain that may come in life of a Haitian or as a Haitian and a woman living in a cruel world as they experience dire situations such as poverty, discrimination, and trauma. Still, with all that, they decide to struggle in love and with love. Let me first introduce the author of the novel. That is Edwidge Danticat. She is a novelist who was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. She moved to Brooklyn, New York in 1981. And most of her writings are heavily influenced by the life she had in both places. Her novel mainly focuses on the lives of women, Haitian women to be specific, and their relationships.
Now that we have introduced what Breathites Memory is about, and also the author of the Breathites Memory book, which is Edwidge Danticat, let's now move on to a character description. So we have Sophie Kako. Sophie Kako is the principal protagonist of the story and also holds the point of view which was the story was told. The story follows the life of Sophie from when she was a little girl up to her adulthood. In the first part, she was introduced as a little girl who lives with her aunt, Tante Aiti, in Crowdy Rosettes. Later on, she went to New York to live with her mom, which is Martin. So everything in her life changes when she discovers the truth about her birth and also the truth about her father. So, to describe Sophie Keiko, she's very well behaved as a little girl. Actually, still very behaved when she was in her teenage years, but she rebelled for many reasons that are going to be discussed later on. But Sophie Kako was never that outrageous of a person. But what's outrageous about her are the actions that she took on because of the challenges that she has been experiencing in her life. Next character is Atikako. Atikako is Sophie's maternal aunt and first guardian. She is also Martin's sister and Grandma Eva's daughter. She is very persevering but ended up biting the bitter part of life because of some unforeseen circumstances, specifically with her social life or with the person or the people who are dear to her. So it's mostly about betrayal, but it is actually highlighted in the later parts of in the earlier and the later parts of the novel. So Grandma Eva even believed that AP is living a sad life because of reasons such as her duties and also her expectations with herself.
So the next character we have is Martin Cajo. Martin is the Sophie's mother, Ati's sister, and Grandma Ife's daughter. She is a trying mother to Sophie. And Sophie first mentioned Martin as the mother whom she only knows in photographs and dreams. Martin may have failed as a mother, but it is life that failed her miserably. Next character we have is Grandma Ife. She is the matriarch of the Cajo family. Grandma Ife lives alone in the remote village of La Nouvelle Damarie in Haiti until Sophie leaves for New York and Haiti comes to Damarie to be with her out of duty. She is wise, candid, practical, and astute, with an intuitive knowledge of human nature and a bottomless reserve of parables. Just like Haiti, Grandma Ife loves to tell stories and parables.
So for the second to the last character to describe or give this description to, we have Joseph Woods. So we have this quote or excerpt from the book. One day, when I was in his house, I sneaked a peek at his driver's license and saw the year that he was born. He was my mother's age, maybe a month or two younger, said Sophie. So Joseph Woods is the neighbor of Sophie, or Sophie and Martin's neighbor during their stay in New York. So Joseph Woods is a musician that later on became Sophie's husband. So we'll get to that later when we discuss the contemporary issues. But to describe Joseph Woods is actually a very caring man, and she truly loved Sophie throughout the course of the story. So he never actually proved to Sophie that he is just taking advantage of her because Sophie is younger than him. So he has proven that he loves Sophie dearly, and his intentions were pure from the beginning. The last character would be Mark Chevalier. Mark is a successful lawyer in New York of Haitian origin. So Mark and Martin are in a long-term relationship, but they hesitate to marry or move in together. So they are very much in love with each other, or at least Mark Chevalier is very much willing to marry Martin, Sophie's mom, but Martin has reservations during that time. That will be it for the character descriptions. Now that we have discussed the characters in Breath Ice Memory by Edwidge Danticat, let's now move on to the contemporary issues that are seen or represented in the book. So, starting with diaspora. Let me read these two excerpts from the earlier chapters of Breath Ice Memory. You are going to work hard here. No one is going to break your heart because you cannot read or write. You have a chance to become the kind of woman E.T. and I have always wanted to be. If you make something of yourself in life, we will all succeed. You can raise our heads. Martin to Sophie. The next one would be, all the brains leave the country, Mark said. You are insulting the people back home by saying there's no brains there. In the earlier parts of Sophie's life, there are already such political concepts that are reflected through people and what's happening around her. Throughout Sophie's infancy and childhood, the person that took care of her is her Tante Ati, or Tant Ati, her aunt. Ati Keiko loved Sophie like her own child. She even decided to live in quad little sets because school is much accessible there. During this time, Martin has been sending cassette tapes and money to AT since she was in New York working to provide for the family. One day, Sophie's mom decided to finally take her to New York. Together with the packages she sent, Martin also included a plane ticket for Sophie bound to New York so she can live with her. Of course, it has been very heavy for both Sophie and AT saying goodbye to each other, especially when it's final time for her to go to the airport where they will part. But during that scene on the way to airport, we can catch a glimpse of what kind of political climate does Haiti have during that time. People are protesting against a oppressive regime, which is actually a nod to what happened to Haiti in real life during those times. Because of the corruption, violence, and poverty, Haitians started to migrate to US, also known as the Haitian diaspora. Haitians believe that America will be the way to achieve their dreams, and it shows when Martin finally met Sophie. She told her she will receive the education she needs in America. So Martin trusts her dreams of becoming a doctor to Sophie because unlike her, she wanted her to at least grow as an important woman, which she and AT failed to become. So, as for the one that Mark said, all the brains leave the country and you are insulting the people back by saying there's no brains there. It is actually a conversation of Mark with a random stranger or random Haitian as well who migrated in Brooklyn during that time or New York during that time. So diaspora is really evident or prevalent during that time, and also it is very much reflected in the course of story in Breath Ice Memory.
The next issue we have is racism. Let me read this line from the novel. Many of the Americans even accused Haitians of having AIDS because they had heard on television that only the 4-H got AIDS: heroin addicts, hemophiliacs, homosexual, and Haitians. When Sophie arrived in America and started her studies, she realized that Haitians are separated from the mainstream of education. Despite being in America, they have exclusive schools only for Haitian students, where they mostly speak French and Creole, and the only time they use English is when taking an English class. Racism was prominent in their environment, causing Sophie to adjust her accent and the way of living so that she'll be belong to their community.
Let's now discuss the other contemporary issues in Breath Ice memory. So let's have sexual harassment in the story. Let me read this excerpt. Where were you? She tapped the belt against her palm, her life limbs becoming more and more red. She took my hand with surprised gentleness and led me upstairs to my bedroom. There, she made me lie on my bed and she tested me. Sexual harassment is an issue that has been continuously pointed out or shown in the story of Sophie's life. It did not only happen to Sophie, but also to other characters like Martin and A.T. One of the sexual harassing acts that is prevalent in the story is the practice they call testing. So this testing refers to Sophie's mother checking if she's still a virgin by inserting her finger in her private area and feeling if the hymen is still intact. This practice is introduced in the story during Sophie's teenage years living with her mom, and during that time, they had a neighbor called Joseph Woods. Joseph Woods is a musician who turned out to be Sophie's husband in the later parts of the story. But yes, Joseph Wood is someone who's significantly older than Sophie. They fell in love with each other through their interactions when Martin is not around because of work. One unfortunate night, Martin found out that Sophie and Joseph have been going out behind their back. Calm yet furious of Sophie's action, Martin led Sophie to the bedroom to check if she is still a virgin. Starting that night, the testing went on and on that it traumatized Sophie. Sophie always loathed the experience, so to break free from her mother's testing, she decided to insert a pestle, a tool to crush different spices. So she inserted that pestle in her private area to tear her, to intentionally tear her hymen. And as Martin tested her again, she finally failed. After that, she went to Joseph to elope and finally accept Joseph's proposal to get married. The sexual harassment caused her a lot of trauma, and it greatly affected her life, especially as a wife, because she cannot perform her marital duties to Joseph because she felt disgusted with her body. So that is one of the contemporary issues that are discussed in the story.
So the next issue we have is rape. Let me read this line from Martin from the novel. But it happens like this. A man grabbed me from the side of the road, pulled me into the cane field, and put you in my body. I was still a young girl then, just barely older than you. Martina reveals that her testing stopped early, as she was raped by an anonymous man in a cane field when she was 16. It was this rape that produced Sophie, and though Martine never saw her attacker's face, she cannot help but look for his features in Sophie's face. This event causes Martine to suffer with nightmares every night and insomnia. The next issue is abuse of power. Let me read a line from the novel. They killed Dessalines. Who killed Dessalines? Asked my grandmother. The Macuts. The Macuts killed Dessalines. The Makuts are presented as unnecessarily violent men armed with guns, oppressing the local people, all being sanctioned by the despotic leader of Haiti at that time. When Grandma Ife and Sophie went to the market to shop, the Makuts made a ruckus when a coal seller accidentally stepped on one of the man's shoes. One of them, noted by Sophie to be younger than his comparisons, looked at her whilst making lewd gestures to communicate his similarly less vicious intentions. This interaction made Sophie wonder about the man who raped his mother and causes all the suffering she has experienced.
So, even in the earlier chapters of the story, poverty is already one of the contemporary issues that are easily highlighted or easily noticeable during the story. But let me read this passage wherein poverty has actually really dealt a big amount of challenge to one of the characters, which is Martin. So, let me read this passage or excerpt. My grandmother sent her to a rich mulatto family in Crowdersets to do any work she could for free room and board as a rest of it. Even though my mother was pregnant and half insane, the family took her in anyway because my grandmother had cooked and cleaned in their home for years before she married my grandfather. Since Martin is already revealed as someone who suffers from the after effects or the trauma from the rape that she had experienced from the past, Martin had certainly had hit at rock bottom as she was grabbed and sexually assaulted by a Makut. Just as people thought the Makuts are the biggest bad guy in story, it is actually life that keeps on pounding on Martin's open wounds by making her realize the reality of life. With the quote that you can see on the screen, Martin had to work pregnant and mentally exhaust herself because her family simply cannot provide her the necessary resources that she needs in her pregnancy. So with that, she is called a restavek. So restavek is a concept or what is called to people or Haitian children given away to work for a host household as a domestic servant. So this can also translate to slavery that happens back in Haiti. So for the next contemporary issues, we have generational trauma. And to start this discussion, in one of the later parts of the story, Sophie went to Haiti again to clear her mind and also to meet Grandma Ife and Ate Kako. She left her husband back in Providence without telling him. This is why Sophie was able to be there when she heard about that Dessalines was murdered by the Makuts and also knew about what her mother went through after she got raped, which was the time Martin became a restavek. During this time, Martin and Sophie is still not okay, and Grandma Eve has always been adamant to let the two reconnect, and she did it by urging Martin to come to Haiti. With this, Martin and Sophie had the opportunity to talk and reconnect with each other, as said here in the excerpt in the screen. So they said, Sophie said, "Why did you put me through those tests?" I blurted out. "If I tell you today, you must never ask me again," said Martin. And Martin trailed with, "I did it," she said, "because my mother had done it to me. I have no greater excuse. I realize standing here that the two greatest pains of my life are very much related. The one good thing about my being raped was that it made the testing stop. The testing and the rape, I leave both every day." The testing is a tradition. It was not just a practice done by Martin to Sophie, but it all started even before both of them cried their first cry in this world. Through that, we may infer the pattern of generational trauma because of tradition. Because of the testing practice, the women of Haiti, or at least the characters in the story, underwent a serious toll on their mental health. It left them questioning themselves. Especially, this practice is done to preserve the purity of women for the convenience of men. Their worth has been reduced to the state of their virginity, leading to a life full of worry, self-doubt, and loathing, especially on the part of those unfortunate, like Martin and Sophie. For the next contemporary issue to discuss, we have mental health. Let me read this excerpt. There were 3 of us in my sexual phobia group. We gave it that name because that's what Rena, the therapist who introduced us, liked to call it. Mental health is one of the most obvious issues in Breath Ice Memory. With Joseph's support, Sophie actually decided to undergo therapy, not just to be a better wife to her husband and a better mother for her daughter Bridget, but just to overcome her fears and the trauma she had. One of the effects Sophie developed because of trauma is an eating disorder called bulimia. Bulimia, or bulimia nervosa, is an eating disorder that distorts the victim's view of themselves, which urges them to force the food out of their body by puking so they would not gain any weight. This also prevents the person suffering from bulimia to have the appetite. Through the course of the therapy, Sophie has shown determination to win her battles against her inner demons, together with two other people that suffered sexual abuse. One of them was raped by her grandfather multiple times. One underwent a procedure in Africa that cuts the clitoris of women to preserve their purity by taking away the sense of sexual pleasure. Of course, Martin is also encouraged by Sophie to undergo therapy, but she refused because, as she said, therapy makes you go back to the when the ugly things happened. Martin explicitly said that if she went on with the therapy, reliving the memory of the past terrifies her. And that is how taking care of mental health is reflected in the story by representing or showing that there is a help called therapy, and also there are professionals who are responsible in treating those kinds of cases. But for some, it actually takes courage for them to just express themselves or tell their story. And we still have a long way to go in the mental health part of society. And that is actually showed by Martin by saying her struggles or saying her fears upon going to a therapy session.
So the next contemporary issue we have is suicide. Let me read this line from the novel. She stuffed her stomach with an old rusty knife. They counted again in the hospital. 17 times. Are you sure? It was 17 times. Martine stabbing herself with a rusty knife is similar to Sophie's self-mutilation with Bessel in the previous chapter. However, while Sophie had used the pestle as a means of freeing herself from the humiliation of testing, Martine uses the knife to liberate herself from the endless torture that she had been forced to bear since the rape incident. The theme we have is mother and daughter relationship. Mother and daughter relationship is prominent in the novel. It not only focuses on the relationship that Sophie and Martine has, but also Martine and Adi to their mother, Grandma Ife, and later on, Sophie's relationship to her daughter, Bridget. Danticat first presents how Grandma Ife treated her daughters and how the virtues she enforced in her children affected the way Martine disciplined her own daughter. Martine was tested by her mother, and even if that affected the way she interacted with men and scared her mentally, Martine did the same thing to Sophie, even though she knew how traumatic it would be for her. This indicates that the way a person is taught influences the way that person will end up teaching their own children. However, Sophie is interested in transcending that truism and making sure that she does not do anything similar to her daughter, Bridget.
One of the contemporary themes to discuss or to highlight in Breath Ice Memory is womanhood and femininity. Womanhood is very much highlighted in the story, ranging from how the women are supposed to be working in much bigger roles. It is actually represented through the characters' aspirations by Tante Ati and also Martin. They wanted to be big roles in their society or in their community in Haiti. and also to how women are supposed to be pure and adherent to the gender roles represented through belief and tradition that are practiced in the story. So, femininity in womanhood is also shown through the challenges that come with being a woman in the family. It is a great theme that, in great by great, we mean to say that it is a big theme to cover in Breath Ice Memory because most of the characters are women and it talks about the challenges of being a woman. We have this excerpt. When I was a girl, my mother used to test us to see if we were virgins. She would put her finger in our very private parts and see if it would go inside. Your Aunt Edie hated it. She used to scream like a pig in a slaughterhouse. The way my mother was raised, a mother is supposed to do that to her daughter until the daughter is married. It is her responsibility to keep her pure. So that is Martin to Sophie. We also have this, which you can see on your screens. They train you to find a husband, she said. They poke at your panties in the middle of the night to see if you're still whole. They listen when you pee to find out if you're peeing too loud. If you pee loud, it means you got big spaces between your legs. They make you burn your fingers learning to cook, then you still have nothing. So with those excerpts, it serves as a testimony of what is womanhood and femininity back in their times of Tante A.P. and Martin. So womanhood is measured through their purity and their duties as a woman being in a marital setting. So you have to provide support to your husband through bearing a child or many children actually, and also being appointed or assigned to household duties such as cooking. But as said here in the excerpt, then you still have nothing. It just means that being a woman before is actually really reduced to a very little worth, which needs to be changed, which actually is reflected to the aspirations of Tante 80 and also Martin. Sadly or unfortunately, they just did not have the chances or the opportunity to actually live up to their aspirations of being doctor and important women in their community. But still, women already have that rage inside them that wants them or urges them to be a part of the bigger world.
So the next theme we have is trauma. Trauma's impact transcends time. In the novel, various kinds of trauma are experienced by the characters, including rape and sexual abuse. Martine experienced the horror of being a victim of rape when she was still a young girl. This experience haunts her until she reaches adulthood. Her nightmares cause her to experience what happened on the day she was raped. To cope up with her trauma, she decided to repress it and avoid facing it. However, these underlying emotions started to resurface when she found out she was pregnant with Mark's child. So let me read to you this line from the novel. 25 years of being raped every night. Could you live with that? The nightmares. I thought they would fade with age, but no. It's like getting raped every night, and I can't keep this baby. So the next trauma is loss of loved ones. Grandma Ife lost her husband. Martine and Adi lost their father. Sophie lost her mom when Martine decided to end her life as she can't bear to carry Mark's child. And finally, Adi, she lost the man she loved the most and her best friend, which causes her a lot of trauma. So Grandma Ife still wear black clothes and black dress as a symbol of mourning to her husband despite all the years that gone by. Next is 18. Still, she suffers from heartbreak even though she is no longer in Croix de Bouquet as Monsieur Agustin marries another woman, Lily. However, when she is in Dame-Marie, her best friend, Louise, left the village without saying any goodbyes or farewell to Ati. So the next we have is trauma lingers in the shadows of tradition. Since the way Martine tested Sophie and the limitations Martine imposed upon herself are all result of Martine's upbringing and of the traditions Martine was subjected to. Martine was traumatized because she was raised in a society where women had no value, and in the end, the traumas she suffered in her childhood pushed her to suicide in adulthood. Sophie was also influenced by the customs and tradition of the country. And because she was tested by her mother, she never became capable of experiencing pleasure during intercourse with her husband. So let me read to you the lines from the novel. Sophie asked Grandma Ife, the testing, why do the mothers do that? If a child dies, you do not die. But if your child is disgraced, you are disgraced. And people, they think daughters will be raised trash with no man in the house. Did your mother do this to you? From the time a girl begins to menstruate to the time you turn her over to her husband, the mother is responsible.
So, the writing style or the contemporary styles that are very evident throughout the story would be first, the first person point of view. So, throughout the story, Edwidge Danticat, the author of the Breathive's Memory novel, used Sophie's point of view in telling the story. So, from the for the earlier chapters until the end, it has always been Sophie telling the story. And here's actually an excerpt. I sometimes saw my mother in my dreams. She would chase me through a field of wildflowers as tall as the sky. When she caught me, she would try to squeeze me into the small frame so I could be in the picture with her. So that is an example of first-person point of view, how Edwidge Danticat used the word I to represent that Sophie is the one talking in the story. Number 2, we have imagery. So an excerpt here that shows the imagery was there was a small trail of blood, or there was a trail of dried blood down from the stairs to the living room and out to the street where they must have loaded her into the ambulance. The bathroom floor was spotless, however, except for the pile of bloody sheets stuffed in the trash bags in the corner. So this imagery was shown when Martin already committed her suicide. This is when Sophie already arrived in the house of Martin. So that is the scene that she saw, or what she had witnessed during the times of the accident. So another contemporary style that is very much evident in the story is symbolism. In the story, daffodils have been a recurring symbol. So we have this excerpt. Tante 80 told me that my mother loved daffodils because they grew in a place that they were not supposed to. So this was said back in the earlier chapters when Sophie is still a child, or when she was still the story is still being told that she's supposed to go to New York with her mother. So daffodils are actually very much foreign in Haiti, but then when they are bought in Haiti, they needed to adapt to the temperature of the place, so they had to change colors. It somehow also symbolizes Sophie when she went back, or when she went to New York to be with her mother. So she needed to recalibrate her ways and recalibrate how she would connect with her mother, since it was a whole lot, or it's a whole new lot of experience that is waiting her in New York. So that's how daffodils symbolize Sophie. Actually, also in the next part, when she is a teenage, we have this excerpt. In the new place, my mother had a patch of land in the back where she started growing hibiscus. Daffodils would need more care, and she had grown tired of them. So again, daffodils are a symbolism of Sophie. So Sophie, in her mother's care as a teenager, she needed a lot of guidance, or at least that's what Martin thought. So when Martin found out that Sophie rebelled because Sophie used the pestle to tear her hymen, which is what was Martin's testing is all about. She had grown tired of Sophie and let Sophie just go wild, or just go out of Martin's custody. So that's how symbolism worked in the story of Bright Eyes Memory. Another symbolism that is actually represented in the story is the color of yellow and red. So we have this excerpt. Everything you own is yellow, she said. Wildflower yellow like dandelions, sunflowers, and daffodils, I added. In her closet, everything was in some shade of red, her favorite color since she'd left Haiti. So the first excerpt is actually pertaining to Sophie and her love for color yellow. So yellow represents sunny or happiness. Then for Martin, it changed because Martin also was mentioned to love the color of yellow or the color of orange back when she was still a child. But then when she moved to New York, she really loved the shade of red. And red has always been a symbolism for passion, sexuality, and also strength. Some also represents red as danger or things like that. So that is a symbolism of what they are feeling. So again, Sophie yellow when she was still very much happy. Same with Martine when back when she was still in Haiti without all the unfortunate events have happened. And then to Martine loving the shade of red, which talks about what she feels during that time when she was already suffering from the events that happened in the past. So for the fourth contemporary style, we have personification. So the author also used personification in a lot of scenes in the story. So an example would be, "My heart, it weeps like a river," she said. And also, when it rains, it is the sky that is crying. So these are traits that are not common or actually impossible for these parts like my heart and also from entities such as the sky to cry and weep. So it is a blatant use of personification.
So the next we have is foreshadowing. Let me read this line from the novel. The car scattered the neighbors and the factory workers as they waved a group farewell. Maybe if I had a really good friend, my eyes would have clung to hers as we were driven away. A red dust rose between me and the only life that I have ever known. There were no children playing, no leaves flying about, no daffodils. So when Sophie and her Aunt Edie drove to the airport, Sophie looked back to where they came from and saw that there were no longer daffodils. Rather, she noticed how the red dust rose as they drove away. This foreshadows the life she'll have when she gets to New York, where red is associated with their home and Martine. Let me read this line from the novel. It was the first time in my life that I noticed that I looked like no one in my family. Not my mother, not my Aunt Ati. I did not look like them when I was a baby, and I did not look like them now. When Sophie came to New York, she saw the picture frame in her mother's room where Ati was holding a baby. She assumed it was her and Martine together in one frame. This scene foreshadows Martine's secret about Sophie's father and all the traumas that comes with it. Next, as Aunt Ati handed me my daughter, she said, "Treat your mother well. You don't have her forever." Sophie bid farewell to Aunt Ati on the second time she came back to Haiti. Ati told her that she must not fight with her mother and should love her, for she will not always be there. This foreshadows that Martine will die not long after they came back to America.